If you're not in the IT space, you likely haven't heard of edge computing, but we're going to learn what it is right now and what it means for you. And yes, even if you're into gaming, as well as other applications for businesses to have much faster computational speeds. Joining us on the line to chat is Dave Cooper, Senior Vice President of Edge Computing at Lumen Technologies. Hi, Dave. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me, Marc.
Sure. Now, before we talk about edge computing, please tell us a bit about Lumen.
Sure. Yeah, Lumen is a publicly held technology company and has a long history in telecommunications, cloud, and security. And we operate some of the largest networks in the world, supporting all sizes of enterprises and consumers. And you may be familiar with many of the companies that have come together to become Lumen, and they include CenturyLink and Level 3, Savvis, Quest, and countless others.
All right. And I wanted to chat with you about your work in gaming. We'll get to that in a moment because that's obviously a very popular topic among many of my listeners. But let's first explain, please, in plain English, if possible, what edge computing is all about.
Absolutely. So edge computing is about delivering the power of compute and data closer to where digital interactions occur. And your audience may ask, what's a digital interaction? And they include everything from how you interact with your favorite game, how robotics are controlled to build your new car, and how contactless retail store experiences are facilitated. And compute power has been that key enabler of innovation, especially over the last couple of decades with the public cloud. And edge computing is bringing that power even closer to people and devices.
So we've heard a lot about cloud computing over the past, say, decade, where the data is held or sometimes the processing power is all handled off-site. So does that imply that edge computing brings it closer to or at the premises of business now?
So, yeah, you're absolutely right. So public cloud has come about and largely centralized, and created these massive economies of scale and allowed compute to be aggregated in places where it's generally lower cost to operate, in the middle of the country and various parts of the U.S. And edge computing is essentially supplementing, I would say, the public cloud by building data centers that are closer into the various cities across the U.S. So not just in the major cities like Chicago or San Francisco or New York City or what have you, but even deeper into Tier 2 and what would be considered Tier 3 cities. Smaller cities that are closer to those people and devices that are actually using that compute power, exactly as you referred to earlier, to improve gaming experiences to those end users.
Okay, got it. So let's chat about gaming then as one of the applications for edge computing. I would assume that those kinds of fast speeds or near zero latency, if you will, is super important for gamers.
Yes, and I think talking about all of the gaming and the evolution of games, whether they're cloud-based games or console-based games, ping times or the latency really impacts that gamer experience, that player experience, and that's actually fueled a lot of the move out towards the edge, and that's been happening for many years now. But what you're seeing in recent times with gaming is this growth in the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, all aspects that make that gaming experience unique. And that technology requires extensive amounts of compute and storage, lots of data going on between the players and the actual place where it needs to be processed. And that's helped out by moving edge computing closer to the edge, closer to those players.
Okay, very cool. We're chatting with Dave Cooper, SVP of Edge Computing at Lumen Technologies. As we wrap up, a lot of our listeners are decision makers at companies, I'd say big and small. I know you focus more on enterprise grade companies, but what are some of the other applications for edge computing and how can our listeners leverage Lumen Technologies to help their business?
So I'm hard-pressed to name an industry where edge computing is not benefiting in terms of the innovation and the ability to be able to deploy applications that dramatically improve with the performance of edge computing. We're seeing a couple of industries, as examples, manufacturing, being one who's using extensive amounts of technology, again, artificial intelligence, machine learning at the top of that list. using a lot of sensors deployed throughout manufacturing facilities. That's benefiting from edge computing. You also see retail, more of a consumer example of how to improve that experience to be able to improve on mitigating shoplifting, be able to provide contactless checkout experiences, a host of other different innovations. But across the enterprise and in all industries, edge computing is making a big difference. And the future is going to be great when it comes to having this capability out there for enterprises to leverage.
And where can our listeners learn more about Lumen?
Just bring up your browser and go to lumen.com/edge. We have a host of information about edge, about our offerings and how we can help the enterprise with their journey on edge computing.
All right, awesome. So lumen.com/edge. Dave Cooper's been our guest. Thanks so much for your time, Dave. Very exciting technologies and interesting to learn about what's happening behind the scenes on these applications that we use, whether it's games or smartphone apps, tapping your credit card at retail and so on.
Thank you, Mark.